Practical Anarchy, A Guide to Self-Determination. Dickie Dredd. Part 20. Globalisation, Power Vacuums and the Internet. By the turn of the 21st century, anarchism had new terrain to contend with. Globalisation ripped down borders for capital while building them higher for people. Sweatshops stitched trainers in one continent so they could be sold at a markup in another. Finance leapt around the world at the speed of light, while migrants faced walls, camps and detention centres. In theory, it was a global village. In practice, it was the same old hierarchy, just wired up faster. For anarchists, the global order created as many cracks as cages. The New World economy was fragile, full of vacuums. Every invasion or coup left a space where state authority crumbled and people had to organise themselves. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, each invasion toppled rulers, but what followed was not the smooth democracy promised on CNN. Instead, there were moments, however brief, when ordinary people had to manage survival themselves. Sometimes militias or warlords stepped in, sometimes local councils, neighbourhood assemblies and spontaneous networks did. The lesson was not that collapse equals chaos, but that power vacuums are openings, dangerous, messy, but also revealing how people can live without a state. Chomsky had long argued that globalisation is less about free people than free corporations, a system of global governance without consent, where decisions are made in boardrooms and enforced by militias. For anarchists, that diagnosis rings true. It is hierarchy on a planetary scale, stripped of even the pretence of democracy. Hart and Negri took it further, describing an empire that is diffuse and networked, with no single capital, but power embedded everywhere, making resistance both harder and more possible. The 1999 protests in Seattle against the WTO were an early reminder that global flows of capital could be disrupted by global networks of resistance. Activists used decentralised organising, affinity groups and direct action to blockade delegates. Black bloc tactics spread across borders as quickly as institutions are opposed. This was globalisation from below, a counterpower mirroring the very networks it resisted. The internet at first looked like the great leveller. Early hackers, cyberpunks and open source coders imagined it as a space beyond states, decentralised, borderless, cooperative. Jaron Lanier has written how the early dream of the web was one of empowerment, a new economy of sharing and creation. Peer-to-peer networks embodied anarchist principles. No central authority, just nodes talking to each other. Wikipedia, Linux, Creative Commons all showed how knowledge and tools could be built and shared without bosses. For a while, the internet felt like an anarchist utopia in the making. These hopes were carried further by explicitly anarchist and libertarian tech cultures. The free software movement, led by figures like Richard Stallman, argued that code should be a commons, free to use, adapt and share. Cyberpunk collectives built tools for privacy and encryption, insisting that secrecy and autonomy could be defended by mathematics as much as by Molotovs. Hack labs squatted tech spaces in cities from Barcelona to Berlin, turned code into community, offering free workshops and networks outside corporate control. Then came the sour turn. Corporate platforms centralised what had been free. Data became the new oil, mined from clicks and swipes. Algorithms controlled what people saw, feeding outrage and polarisation. Surveillance capitalism turned every interaction into a profit stream. The liberatory promise of the web curdled into new monopolies, Silicon Valley as the new empire. Lanier has been sharp on this too, warning that we are not the customers of the internet, we are the product. The digital commons, once sprawling, was fenced in by corporations. Anarchists had grappled with this shift. Hacktivist collectives like Anonymous tried to hold on to the dream of a borderless resistance, taking down government sites, leaking secrets, disrupting authoritarian propaganda. Others built mesh networks, cryptographic tools, and open source platforms to carve out spaces of autonomy. At the same time, the internet made state surveillance easier than ever. Power doesn't need to watch you through a policeman's window if it can watch you through your phone. Castells called this networked power, domination exercised not only by coercion but by shaping flows of information themselves. And now there's AI. For some, it looks like another leap forward toward freedom, tools that can write, create, imagine alongside us. For others, it's a new enclosure, centralised systems owned by corporations, hoarding data and shaping thought itself. Anarchists would say the issue is not the technology, but the control. A decentralised AI commons, open, transparent, accountable to those who use it, could be a tool of liberation. A handful of megacore training black box models to sell ads and monitor workers? That's just a shinier form of domination. The irony is thick. A technology that could amplify cooperation, dismantle drudgery is, in the wrong hands, another machine for surveillance, profit and control. The anarchist task, then, is not to reject it, but to wrestle for its form, to demand that intelligence, artificial or human, belongs to the many, not the few. This book will return to AI in more detail later. For now, it is enough to say the digital frontier, like every frontier, is a struggle over freedom. Part 21, Chapter Conclusion, Anarchism on the Edge of the 21st Century. As the 20th century closed and the new one opened, anarchism had become less a historical curiosity and more a persistent undercurrent. From Spain to Seattle, from hack labs to housing co-ops, the black and red thread kept weaving itself through the fabric of modern life. Anarchism at the edge of the 21st century is not a single movement or a unified ideology. It is a patchwork of practices, squats, communes, co-ops, protest networks, hacktivist collectives, indigenous land struggles, feminist assemblies. Some burn bright in moments of revolt, others smoulder quietly for decades. Together they prove that the desire to live without rulers is not an antique dream, but a living possibility. The challenges are formidable. States are more armed, corporations more entrenched, surveillance more subtle than ever. The failures of the 20th century revolutions, Spain crushed by fascism, Russia devoured by Bolshevik centralism, countless movements strangled by repression, still hang heavy. The rise of neoliberalism, global finance and digital monopolies has made domination at once more abstract and more intimate in our workplaces, on our screens, in the very language we use. And yet, cracks keep opening. Every disaster reveals people's capacity for self-organisation. Every protest camp or occupied square shows that strangers can govern themselves without leaders. Every co-op that feeds a community, every mesh network that roots around corporate servers, every free school that shares knowledge without hierarchy. All of these are rehearsals for a freer world. The internet, once hailed as the anarchist playground, has been fenced in, but its DNA of decentralisation remains, waiting to be reclaimed. Globalisation has tightened the grip of empire, but it has also linked struggles across borders. Power vacuums in war zones show both the dangers of collapse and the potential for grassroots survival. AI is arriving both as a threat and an opportunity, another battleground where domination can be reinforced or dismantled. The rise of social media has also sharpened these contradictions. Platforms built on surveillance and profit engineer addiction, amplify outrage and fuel polarisation. The result is a mounting mental health crisis, especially among the young people, and a political climate where far-right currents spread faster than solidarity. These are not side effects, but core features of an attention economy designed for profit, not well-being. Anarchists see this as both a danger and a challenge, proof that digital commons must be reclaimed if freedom is to mean anything in the networked age. The deeper analysis will come later, but here it is enough to note the struggle for autonomy is no longer only in streets and workplaces, but in the architecture of the platforms where millions now live part of their lives. Anarchism does not offer a map of the future, it offers a compass, a refusal of hierarchy, a commitment to equality, a belief that people can rule themselves. On the edge of the 21st century, the task is not to replicate past failures or cling to old models, but to nurture the seeds already sprouting in everyday life, mutual aid, solidarity, self-management, and to be ready when the next cracks in the system open. The state insists that without it, there is only chaos. The history of anarchism shows otherwise. The real question of the 21st century is whether we can make those hidden practices, the co-ops, the networks, the solidarities, big enough, resilient enough and bold enough to step out of the shadows. If we can, then the edge of the 21st century is not just a cliff of crisis, is also a horizon of possibility. And in the next chapter, we'll start talking about what we mean by the state.